The elevator doors opened with that soft metallic sigh I'd heard 1,000 times before. It was just after 9 on a Monday morning, and I was running late for work. Coffee in one hand, purse slipping off my shoulder keys, jangling. Just another ordinary morning in my ordinary life. Or so I thought. "Emily." The voice stopped me cold. Mrs. Caldwell stood in the hallway, perfectly composed as always. She was one of those women who seemed to have been born elegant silver hair, swept into a neat bun, a silk scarf at her throat, even though it was just a regular weekday. She'd lived in 4B for as long as I'd been here, maybe longer. We exchanged pleasantries in the mailroom, smiled in passing, but we weren't close. The look on her face told me this wasn't going to be a pleasant exchange. "Good morning, Mrs. Caldwell." I tried to sound normal, but something in her expression made my stomach tighten. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you know who comes to your apartment every Tuesday afternoon?" The question hung in the air between us. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Then I laughed, one of those nervous, confused sounds that comes out when your brain can't quite process what it's hearing. I'm sorry I don't. What are you talking about?" Mrs. Caldwell's eyes held mine. There was no judgment there, just concern. "I've noticed someone entering your place while you're gone. Every Tuesday. Around 1 or 1:30. I thought perhaps you had a housekeeper, or maybe a friend with a key." My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. "No. No one has a key except my husband and me." She nodded slowly, and I realized she'd already known that answer. "I see. Well, dear, I don't mean to pry, but you might want to check. These days you can never be too careful." The elevator arrived. She stepped inside, gave me one last meaningful look, and the doors closed. I stood there in the empty hallway, my heart starting to pound. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Down the hall, someone's TV murmured through a closed door. Everything looked exactly as it always did, the same beige carpet, the same cream-colored walls, the same potted plant by the stairwell that never seemed to grow or die. But something had shifted. That one question had cracked open a door I didn't even know was there. Who comes to your apartment every Tuesday, all day at work? I couldn't focus. I sat through meetings without hearing a word, stared at my computer screen while emails piled up unanswered. That question kept circling through my mind, each time bringing new possibilities, each one worse than the last. I tried to think logically. Mrs. Caldwell was old, maybe 70. She could have mixed up the apartments. There were 3 identical doors on every floor. Maybe she'd seen someone going into 5C or 5E and thought it was mine. Or maybe it was Daniel, my son. He and his wife Lauren lived across town, but he still had some boxes stored in our spare room. Maybe he'd been coming by to pick things up, but Daniel was busy with his new job, his new marriage. He barely called anymore, let alone visited on a regular schedule. By 3 o'clock, I gave up pretending to work and drove home early. The building looked the same as always, a modest mid-rise in a quiet neighborhood brick facade with neat flower beds out front. I'd lived here with Mark for 23 years, raised Daniel here. This was home. I unlocked the door and stood in the entryway for a long moment, just looking. Everything appeared normal. The mail was on the console table where I'd left it that morning. The lavender air freshener I'd plugged in last week still hummed quietly in the corner. The living room was tidy. Mark always complained I kept things too clean, said I was obsessive about it. But now, standing here, something felt off. The apartment was too clean. I walked slowly through each room. Kitchen spotless. Bathroom nothing out of place. Our bedroom bed made curtains drawn exactly as I'd left them. But there was something in the air, a scent I couldn't quite place. Floral, but not my usual perfume. Lighter, sweeter. I opened my dresser drawers one by one, checking. Nothing missing. Nothing moved. And yet, I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking slightly. "You're being paranoid," I whispered to the empty room. Mrs. Caldwell got confused, that's all. But I didn't believe it. That evening, Mark came home at his usual time. I heard his key in the lock, the familiar sound of him dropping his briefcase by the door, loosening his tie. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" He walked into the kitchen where I was standing by the stove, stirring pasta sauce I didn't remember starting. He kissed my cheek, a quick, absent gesture we'd done 1,000 times. "Fine," I said, then trying to sound casual, "Mrs. Caldwell said something strange to me this morning." Mark opened the refrigerator, pulled out a beer. "Yeah, what did the old busybody want?" The dismissive tone in his voice made me pause. She said she's seen someone coming into our apartment on Tuesdays, when we're both at work. Mark took a long sip of his beer. When he looked at me, his expression was perfectly calm. And I just wondered if you knew anything about it. He laughed. Come on, you know how she is. Always watching everyone, always gossiping. Remember when she told the whole building that the Johnsons were getting divorced and they'd just taken separate vacations? That was different. Was it, Whoa? He set his beer down, walked over and took my hands. Baby, you're shaking. Don't let her get in your head like this. There's no one coming into our apartment. It's just her imagination. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. You're probably right, I said. But that night, lying in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling and listened to his breathing even out into sleep. And I kept thinking about how his eyes had flickered just for a second when I'd mentioned Tuesday. Just for a second, he'd looked away. Tuesday came too quickly. I got ready for work like always, but my mind was already racing ahead. Before I left, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and looked around one more time, trying to memorize exactly how everything sat. The angle of the alarm clock, the wrinkle in the bedspread, the position of my jewelry box on the dresser. Have a good day, Mark called from the kitchen. You too. I walked to my car, then sat there for 5 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, engine running. What was I doing? Was I really going to spend the whole day obsessing over this? Yes, I was. At lunch, instead of eating, I sat in my car in the parking garage and searched on my phone. Small hidden cameras. The results were overwhelming, hundreds of options, all promising to be discreet, easy to install, motion activated. I picked one almost at random and paid for overnight shipping. The camera arrived Wednesday morning, a small package, innocuous. Inside was a device no bigger than a USB drive with a magnetic mount and Wi-Fi connectivity. The instructions said it could record for up to 12 hours on a single charge. I waited until Saturday when Mark went to play golf. Then I installed it. I chose a spot on the bookshelf near our front door, angled so it would capture anyone entering. The camera was small enough to hide behind a picture frame. Unless you were looking for it, you'd never notice it was there. My hands trembled the entire time. I kept thinking, this is crazy. You're spying on your own home. This is something a crazy person does. But I couldn't stop. That night, Mark noticed I was quiet over dinner. Everything okay? Just tired, I said, pushing food around my plate. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You've seemed off lately. Is it work? Maybe. I looked at our hands together, his larger rough from years of construction work, mine smaller, the gold wedding band he'd slipped on my finger 23 years ago, still fitting perfectly. Mark, are we okay? What, of course we're okay. He looked genuinely confused. Where's this coming from? I don't know. I feel like something's wrong and I can't figure out what it is. He stood up, came around the table, and wrapped his arms around me from behind. Nothing's wrong. You're just stressed. Why don't we take a weekend trip soon? Just the two of us. Get away from the city. I leaned back against him, wanting so badly for this to be enough. That sounds nice. But lying in bed that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Tuesday, about the camera waiting silently on the shelf, about what it might or might not show me. Part of me hoped it would show nothing, that I was wrong, paranoid, letting Mrs. Caldwell's gossip poison my mind. But a deeper part of me, the part that had noticed the strange perfume, the too clean apartment, Mark's averted eyes, that part already knew the truth. Tuesday arrived like a held breath finally released. I went to work, sat through meetings, answered emails. All of it mechanical, automatic. My mind was somewhere else entirely. At 12:30, I couldn't take it anymore. I told my assistant I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a lie. My stomach was in knots, and drove home. But I didn't go upstairs. Instead, I parked across the street at the coffee shop and ordered a latte I didn't drink. I sat by the window where I could see the entrance to my building. At 1:13 p.m., a white Honda Civic pulled into the visitor parking. Lauren got out. My daughter-in-law, Daniel's wife of 2 years. 25 years old, blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing a soft pink sweater and jeans. She looked wholesome, innocent, like a kindergarten teacher, which she was. I watched her walk to the building entrance, watched her pull out a key, my spare key, and let herself in. The coffee cup trembled in my hand, hot liquid sloshing over the rim. I sat there for exactly 20 minutes. At 1:33, Lauren emerged, got in her car, and drove away. She'd looked relaxed, unhurried, like someone who'd just completed a routine errand. I waited another 10 minutes before I went upstairs. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it, but that smell, that sweet floral perfume, was stronger now. I went straight to the bedroom, opened my dresser drawer. There, tucked beneath my scarves, was a white envelope. My heart hammered as I picked it up. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a photograph, old and slightly faded. It showed Mark at a backyard barbecue I remembered that day, maybe 10 years ago. He was standing next to Lauren, his hand on her shoulder. Both of them were laughing. I'd taken this photo myself. I remembered thinking how nice it was that Mark got along so well with Daniel's girlfriend. But now, looking at it with new eyes, I saw something else. The way they stood just slightly too close. The way Mark's hand lingered. The way Lauren's smile was directed at him, not at the camera. On the back, in neat handwriting I didn't recognize, "Some things never change." I stood there, the photograph shaking in my hands, the room spinning slightly. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Closed the drawer, smoothed the clothes. And I went to check the camera footage. The camera app took forever to load, or maybe it was just my shaking hands making everything feel slower. I sat on the couch phone, clutched in both hands, watching the little spinning circle. Finally, the interface appeared. One motion alert. Timestamp 1:13 p.m. I pressed play. The video quality was better than I'd expected. Clear enough to see Lauren's face as she unlocked the door and stepped inside. She moved confidently, comfortably. This wasn't her first time here. She walked straight to the bedroom, barely glancing at anything else. I fast-forwarded slightly. Watched her open my dresser drawer, place the envelope inside, then step back and look around the room. She pulled a small perfume bottle from her purse and sprayed it once into the air. The gesture was almost ritualistic. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She looked directly at the camera. Even though it was hidden, even though there was no way she should have known it was there, her eyes found the exact spot where I'd placed it. And she smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not embarrassed or guilty. Just knowing. Then she left. The video ended. Total time elapsed 14 minutes. I sat there staring at the blank screen, my mind reeling. She knew. She knew about the camera, which meant this wasn't just about hiding something. This was a message, a game. But what did the photograph mean, and who had written that note on the back? I didn't confront Mark that evening. Some instinct told me to wait to understand more before I made my move. At dinner, he talked about a project at work. I nodded, made appropriate sounds, and watched him carefully, looking for signs. But he seemed normal. Tired from a long day, slightly distracted, but normal. "How was your Tuesday?" he asked casually. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "Fine. Busy. Didn't you say you weren't feeling well? You left work early." I'd forgotten I'd told my assistant that. "Headache. It passed." He nodded already, reaching for his phone. "Good." After he went to bed, I pulled out the photograph again, studied it under the lamp, tried to remember that day more clearly. It had been one of the first times Lauren came to a family gathering. Daniel had been so proud, so happy to introduce his new girlfriend. She'd seemed sweet, a little shy. She'd helped me in the kitchen, complimented my cooking, laughed at Mark's dad jokes. Had something happened that day? Something I'd missed? I turned the photo over again. Some things never change. What things? And why leave this for me to find Wednesday morning? I woke up exhausted. I'd barely slept, my mind turning over every possibility, every explanation. Before Mark woke up, I went to the bedroom and opened the dresser drawer where I'd put the envelope back. It was gone. Completely gone. I searched through every item in the drawer. Nothing. I checked the other drawers. Under the bed. Behind the dresser. Nothing. Someone had taken it. I sat on the edge of the bed trying to slow my racing heart. Only 2 people had been in this apartment since yesterday, me and Mark. Mark had been home by 5:30 p.m., his usual time, which meant he'd had access to the bedroom before I got home from work at 6:15. Plenty of time to check the drawer and remove the envelope. But how did he know to look? Unless Lauren had told him. Unless they'd planned this together. I heard the shower turn on in the bathroom. Mark getting ready for work. I looked at my reflection in the dresser mirror. The woman looking back at me had dark circles under her eyes, hair uncombed, still in yesterday's clothes. She looked scared. No, not scared. She looked like someone who was starting to understand. That evening, instead of going home after work, I drove to the public library, used one of their computers instead of my own, created a new email account that Mark didn't know about. Then I logged into our bank accounts. We had 2 checking accounts and 1 savings, all joint, all connected. I'd never been the type to monitor them closely. Mark handled most of the finances. I trusted him. I scrolled through months of transactions looking for anything unusual. There, every Tuesday for the past 8 weeks, a cash withdrawal, $500 each time, from the ATM near Mark's office. Always at 12:45 p.m. The timing was too precise to be coincidental, the amount too consistent. I sat back staring at the screen. $4,000. What was he paying for, or who was he paying Thursday morning? I called in sick to work. For real this time. Mark had already left for the office. I had the apartment to myself. I started in his home office, a small room he used for paperwork and occasionally working from home. I felt guilty rifling through his desk, but the guilt was drowning in something larger, a desperate need to know. Bills, tax documents, old birthday cards from Daniel. Nothing suspicious. Then I found the laptop he kept in the bottom drawer, his old one that he'd replaced last year but never thrown away. I opened it. The battery was dead, so I plugged it in and waited for it to boot up. No password protection. Mark had always been careless about that. His email account auto-loaded. Most of the messages were old work-related, but there was a drafts folder with 3 unsent messages in it. I clicked the first one. To no recipient. Subject, no subject, date, 2 months ago. I think we should slow down. She's starting to notice things. Last Tuesday was too risky. Let me handle it. The message cut off there. Unsent. Unfinished. But the meaning was clear enough. I read it 3 times, each word sinking in deeper. She's starting to notice things. Me. He was talking about me. Last Tuesday was too risky. Tuesday. Always Tuesday. Let me handle it. Handle what handle? Me. I took a photo of the screen with my phone. Then I searched for any sent messages from around that same time. Nothing to Lauren. Nothing suspicious at all. Which meant he'd been careful. Deleted what he needed to delete. But he'd forgotten about the drafts. About the words he'd thought, but never sent. I closed the laptop carefully, put it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I went to the bedroom and installed a second camera. This one facing the dresser where Lauren had left the envelope. If they wanted to play games, I would play. But by my rules now. That afternoon I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to see Mrs. Caldwell. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, something in her face told me she'd been expecting this. "Emily, dear, come in." Her apartment smelled like Earl Grey tea and old books. She poured us both cups, and we sat in her living room surrounded by photographs of people I didn't know. "I need to know," I said quietly. "How long have you been seeing someone come to my apartment?" Mrs. Caldwell set down her teacup carefully. "About 3 months, maybe a little longer." "And you're sure it's my apartment, not someone else's?" "I'm sure. I've seen her enter with a key, and I've seen your husband arrive about 15 minutes after her twice now." The room tilted slightly. "Mark, you've seen Mark come home in the middle of the day." "Yes, on Tuesdays. I thought perhaps it was an arrangement between you and your husband. Some couples have modern approaches to marriage. But then I saw how she looked at him, and I thought, no, this woman doesn't know." "The woman," I said carefully. "Can you describe her? Young, pretty, blonde hair. She dresses nicely professional but casual. She's always carrying a large purse." "Lauren, every detail fit. I felt something crack open inside me. Not heartbreak, not yet. Something colder, clearer. Why didn't you tell me this before, when you stopped me at the elevator?" Mrs. Caldwell looked down at her hands. They were spotted with age, her wedding ring loose on her thin finger. "Because I wasn't certain," she said softly. "And because I know what it's like to learn your life is built on lies. I wanted to be sure before I shattered everything you believed." We sat in silence for a moment. "Thank you," I finally said, "for telling me." As I stood to leave, she caught my hand. "Emily, whatever you discover, whatever you decide to do, remember that you're stronger than you think. Women like us, we survive." That night, Mark came home late, after 9. He said there was a work dinner he'd forgotten to mention. I smiled, nodded, asked how it went. He kissed my forehead and said he was exhausted going straight to bed. I stayed up, sitting in the dark living room, looking out at the city lights. In my hand was my phone. On the screen was the photograph of the draft email, the evidence of Tuesday's withdrawals, the video of Lauren entering my home. Everything was finally making sense. Mark had secrets. Lauren had secrets. And the envelope, that mysterious photograph with its cryptic message, was someone's way of making sure I found out. But who wanted me to know I looked across the hall at Mrs. Caldwell's door, at 4B? And for the first time I wondered, what secrets was she keeping? I called in sick the following Tuesday. Mark kissed my forehead before leaving for work, told me to rest. The concern in his voice might have been genuine, or he'd just gotten better at lying. At 12:30, I was back at the coffee shop across from our building. Same window seat. Waiting. 1:14 p.m. Lauren's white Honda arrived. She walked into the building with my spare key, looking relaxed, unhurried. Then at 1:31 p.m., Mark's silver Toyota pulled in. My coffee cup nearly slipped from my hands. He parked in the back corner, looked around nervously, then disappeared through the side entrance, the one leading to the service stairs. I sat frozen, watching. Every part of me wanted to run up there and catch them. But something held me back. Not yet. Know everything first. 38 minutes later, Mark emerged, adjusting his tie, checking his phone, walking casually to his car. 8 minutes after that, Lauren came out. But she looked different now, upset, shaken. She sat in her car for several minutes, wiping her eyes before driving away. I went home and checked the camera footage with trembling hands. Lauren entered at 1:14, walked to the bedroom, sat on my bed, and waited. At 1:32, Mark appeared. I braced myself for what I'd see. An embrace, a kiss, proof of the affair I'd convinced myself was happening. But they didn't touch. They didn't kiss. Instead, Mark sat beside her, keeping distance between them, and they talked. Lauren was agitated, gesturing frantically. Mark looked tired, defensive. Then Lauren said something that made Mark grab her arm urgently. She pulled away, stood up, pointing at him, accusing. This didn't look like an affair. This looked like a fight. Mark pulled out his phone, showed her something. Lauren's face crumpled. She collapsed back onto the bed, head in her hands, shoulders shaking. Mark sat beside her again, put his arm around her. Not romantically, protectively, the way you'd comfort someone who was breaking. They stayed like that for several minutes. Then Mark said something final and left. Lauren sat alone on my bed for 8 more minutes before composing herself and walking out. I watched the video 3 times. Nothing made sense. What were they fighting about? What did Mark show her that devastated her so completely I needed to hear what they were saying? That evening at dinner, Mark noticed my silence. Still not feeling well? I'm fine. He studied me. Something's wrong. Talk to me. The irony almost made me laugh. Talk to you when you've been lying for months. Nothing's wrong, I said. When he went to shower, I grabbed his phone from the counter. The passcode had been changed. For 23 years, it had been our anniversary. Now it was something else. I tried Daniel's birthday. Wrong. My birthday. Wrong. Lauren's birthday. Wrong. The phone locked after 3 attempts. He knew I was getting close, and he was covering his tracks. Friday afternoon, I climbed into our attic storage. I was looking for anything from before we got married, before Daniel was born. Anything from when Mark and I first met. After 2 hours of searching, I found a box labeled Mark, Personal. Inside, old textbooks, baseball trophies, letters from his deceased mother, and at the bottom an unlabeled manila folder. I opened it. Birth certificate. Baby girl, Lauren Marie Harrison. Mother Jessica Ann Harrison. Father Mark Thomas Grant. My Mark. There were more documents, custody papers, a handwritten letter from Jessica. Mark, I can't do this anymore. I'm not capable of being a mother. You were right. I'm signing over full custody. Please don't try to find me. I'm sorry. The letter was dated 23 years ago. I sat back against a dusty box papers scattered in my lap. Mark had a daughter he'd never told me about. And that daughter was Lauren, my son's wife. Daniel married his own half-sister. I don't remember driving to Mrs. Caldwell's apartment, But suddenly I was in her living room, tears streaming down my face while she poured tea with steady hands. "Mark has a daughter," I whispered, "from before we married, and it's Lauren, my son's wife." Mrs. Caldwell didn't look surprised. She just nodded slowly as if I'd confirmed something she already knew. "When did you find out?" I asked. I suspected from the first time I saw them together. The way he looked at her. Not like a man having an affair, like a father protecting his child. "Then why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me without proof?" She was right. I would have thought she was insane, Mrs. N. Caldwell walked to her desk and pulled out an envelope. The white envelope I'd found in my dresser. "I left that photograph for you," she said quietly. "I thought if you saw them together, you might start asking questions." How did you get into my apartment?" She turned to face me. In the afternoon light, I saw something I'd never noticed before. A resemblance to Lauren, around the eyes, the mouth. "Because 23 years ago," she said softly, "my name was Jessica Harrison, and Lauren is my daughter." I couldn't breathe. Jessica sat down across from me. "I didn't die. After Lauren was born, I had severe postpartum depression. It destroyed me. One night I walked out of the psychiatric hospital and disappeared. Mark told everyone I died in an accident. It was easier than the truth." "You abandoned your baby." "Yes," her voice cracked. "I abandoned my 3-month-old daughter. I spent years in treatment facilities. When I finally got healthy enough to search for her, I found out Mark had given her to a family friend to raise. Told them I was dead and he couldn't care for a baby alone. How are you here now?" 2 years ago, I discovered Lauren was engaged. To Daniel. To Mark's son. I tried to stop it. I sent anonymous letters to Mark, called him, begged him to tell Daniel the truth. He refused. Said the kids were in love and it was too late. "So you moved into this building?" "I had to do something. I thought if you discovered the truth and confronted Mark, it would force everything into the light." "Does Lauren know?" I asked. "Does she know Mark is her father?" "She found out 6 months ago. Mark finally told her. That's when the Tuesday visits started. She'd been searching for her biological father her whole life. When she discovered the truth, she was devastated. But Mark insisted their relationship stay secret, that you and Daniel could never know, because Daniel is her half-brother." "Yes." My stomach turned. "Does Daniel know?" Jessica looked down at her hands. "You'd have to ask him." I drove straight to Daniel's house. He answered the door in sweatpants and a college t-shirt. "Mom." "What's wrong?" "Did you know that Lauren is your father's daughter, your half-sister?" The color drained from his face. "Yes." The word hit like a punch. "How long?" He sat down heavily, head in his hands. "Dad told me a year ago, before the wedding. He said Lauren didn't know, and we couldn't tell her because it would destroy her. He said legally it was fine because we didn't share a mother, and you went through with the wedding knowing she was your sister. I love her." Daniel looked up, tears streaming. "I know it's wrong, but I can't lose her." "She knows now," I said. "Lauren knows the truth. That's why she's been meeting your father." His face crumpled. "I know. She found out 3 months ago. We almost got divorced, but she still loves me." "You can't stay married. This isn't right." "Who decides what's right?" he asked desperately. "We didn't know when we fell in love. Why should we be punished?" I had no answer. "Are you going to tell people?" he whispered. "I don't know." "Saturday night," I told Daniel. "Your apartment. You, Lauren, Mark, and Jessica. Everyone at the same table. No more secrets." "Jessica." Daniel looked confused. "Mrs. Caldwell. Lauren's mother who supposedly died." Saturday evening. Mark didn't know about the dinner until I waited by the door with car keys in hand. "We need to go to Daniel's." "Now, Em, I'm exhausted." "Now." We drove in silence. When we arrived, Lauren stood behind Daniel, pale and drawn. She couldn't look at me. "Come in," Daniel said. "There's someone else here." Jessica was sitting on the couch. Mark froze mid-step. "Jessica." "Hello, Mark." I watched my husband's face cycle through shock-fear calculation. "Everyone sit down," I said calmly. "It's time we talked about the truth." Mark tried one last time. I don't know what you think." "Sit down." He sat. I remained standing. Strange calm had settled over me. 26 years ago, Mark had a daughter with Jessica, Lauren. Jessica left due to mental illness. Mark told everyone she died. He gave Lauren to a family friend to raise. I looked at each of them. 2 years ago, Mark orchestrated a meeting between Daniel and Lauren. He knew she was his daughter. He watched them fall in love. He stood at their wedding and said nothing. 1 year before the wedding, Mark told Daniel the truth, that Lauren was his half-sister, and Daniel chose to marry her anyway. 6 months ago, Mark finally told Lauren who he really was. She's been coming to our apartment every Tuesday. Mark has been lying to me about work meetings while spending afternoons with the daughter I never knew existed. I turned to Mark. Did I miss anything? He looked up completely exposed. I was trying to protect everyone. By lying. By keeping the family together, if I'd told you about Lauren from the beginning, you never would have married me. If I'd told Daniel before the wedding, he would have lost the woman he loved. So you let them all live in a lie. Mark stood. What would you have done, Emily? If you'd known I had a daughter, would you have married me? The question stung, because he was right. 23 years ago, I wasn't ready for instant motherhood. But that wasn't the point. You didn't give me the choice, I said quietly. You built our marriage on lies. Jessica spoke for the first time. He didn't just lie to you. He let our daughter grow up thinking her mother was dead and her father didn't want her. Mark turned on her. You abandoned her. You walked out. Don't act like I'm the villain when you couldn't handle being a mother. I was sick. Jessica's voice cracked. I needed help and you told everyone I was dead. You erased me. Lauren stood suddenly. Stop it. Both of you stop. The room fell silent. Lauren stood shaking in the middle of the room. You're both responsible, and now Daniel and I are paying for it. She turned to me. Emily, I'm sorry for coming into your home for lying. But I need you to understand something. She took Daniel's hand. I love your son. I loved him before I knew the truth, and I still love him now. Lauren? No, let me finish. Daniel and I have talked about this every day for 3 months. We've cried, we've considered divorce, but we keep coming back to this. We didn't choose our fathers. We didn't choose to be related. What we chose was each other. Daniel stood beside her. We're getting our marriage annulled legally. But we're staying together, not as husband and wife, but as partners, as people who love each other. Mark shook his head. You can't. It will destroy both your lives. People should talk, I said, cutting him off, because what happened here is wrong. You made it wrong, Mark. I looked at each of them, at the wreckage. I'm filing for divorce. I'm done. Mark's face crumpled. Em, please. No, I'll never trust you again. And without trust, we have nothing. I picked up my purse. Before leaving, I turned back. Lauren, Daniel, whatever you decide, you have my support. Not my judgment. My support. I looked at Mark and Jessica. But you two need to live with what you've done, because your choices didn't just hurt each other. They hurt everyone. I walked out into the night air. Behind me, someone started crying. But I kept walking. Toward my car. Toward whatever came next. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The next morning, I woke up alone in my apartment for the first time in 23 years. Mark had taken a suitcase and left after the confrontation. He'd sent a text around midnight. Staying at a hotel. We need to talk when you're ready. I deleted it. The apartment felt different, lighter somehow despite everything. I walked through each room looking at our life together with new eyes. The photos on the wall, our wedding, Daniel's graduation, family vacations. All of it felt like scenes from someone else's life, a life I'd been living in the dark. I took down the wedding photo first, then the others one by one. By noon, the walls were bare. My phone rang constantly. Mark calling, texting. I blocked his number. He'd have to communicate through lawyers now. Daniel called once. Mom, are you okay? I'm better than I've been in months, I said, and I meant it. I'm so sorry, for lying, for all of it. I know, honey, but you're an adult. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Are you disowning me? The pain in his voice broke something in me. No, never. But I need time. We all need time. Monday morning, I went to see a lawyer. Susan Mitchell, a friend from book club who'd become a family attorney. I'd called her Sunday night, told her I needed a consultation. She poured coffee and listened as I explained everything. When I finished, she sat back and let out a low whistle. That's That's quite a story. Can I divorce him? I mean, legally, what are my options? Emily, you can divorce him for eating crackers too loudly if you want. But with this level of deception, concealing a child, orchestrating your son's marriage to his half-sister, financial deception, you have grounds for fault-based divorce. You'll get a very favorable settlement. I don't care about the money. I just want out. Susan nodded. Then we'll make this as quick and clean as possible. I'll file the papers this week. As I stood to leave, she caught my hand. Emily, I've known you for 8 years. You're one of the strongest women I know. You're going to be okay. I wanted to believe her. Mark showed up at the apartment that evening. I'd changed the locks that afternoon so he couldn't get in. He knocked for 10 minutes before I finally opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. We need to talk, he said. He looked terrible. Unshaven, exhausted, hollow. Talk to my lawyer. Em, please. I know I screwed up. Screwed up. I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. Mark, you didn't screw up. You systematically lied to me for our entire marriage. That's not a mistake. That's a choice you made every single day. I was trying to protect you. Stop saying that. My voice rose. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself. Because if I'd known the truth, I would have left. And you knew that. He stared at me through the gap in the door. I love you. That was always real. I don't think you know what love is, I said quietly. Love requires honesty. Trust. You gave me neither. I closed the door, heard him stand there for another minute, then his footsteps retreating down the hall. I didn't cry. I'd cried enough. Jessica came to see me Wednesday. I almost didn't let her in, but curiosity won out. She stood in my living room looking at the bare walls. I'm sorry, she said. For my part in this, I should have been braver. Should have revealed myself earlier instead of playing games with that envelope. Why didn't you? Fear. Shame. I abandoned my daughter Emily. How do you come back from that? How do you face the child you left? I thought about that, about the impossible weight of her choices. Lauren wants to see you. She does. We've met 3 times now. She's angrier than I expected, but she's also willing to try, to build something. That's good. Jessica moved toward the door, then paused. You know what's strange? All these years I envied you. You had Mark a son, a normal life. I thought you were so lucky, but you were living in a lie just like the rest of us. After she left, I stood at the window watching the city. She was right. We'd all been living in lies. The only difference was I hadn't known it. But I knew now, and I would never go back. The divorce hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Mark's lawyer tried to delay it, filing motion after motion, but Susan was better. Every attempt to stall was shut down. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully. Navy suit hair, pulled back, minimal makeup. I wanted to look strong, composed, like a woman who'd made peace with her decision. The courthouse was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of old coffee and stress. Mark was already there with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit who looked annoyed to be handling a simple divorce case. Mark tried to catch my eye as I sat down. I looked straight ahead. The judge was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the paperwork quickly, then looked up. This is a petition for divorce based on fraud and emotional harm. Mrs. Grant, would you like to present your case? Susan stood. Your Honor, my client has discovered that her husband concealed the existence of a biological daughter throughout their 23-year marriage. Furthermore, he orchestrated the marriage between this daughter and Mrs. Grant's son, his own son, creating a marriage between half-siblings. He maintained this deception even after both parties discovered the truth. Mark's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, while my client admits to an error in judgment, this is a private family matter that doesn't constitute legal fraud. The marriage was consensual. The finances were shared equally. I'd like to speak, I said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at me. Susan nodded encouragingly. Your Honor, my husband didn't just lie about having a daughter. He stole my ability to make informed choices. If I'd known the truth when we met, I could have decided whether I was ready to be a stepmother. When our children started dating, I could have stopped it. When they got engaged, I could have demanded the truth. I looked at Mark for the first time. Instead, he made all those choices for me. He decided I couldn't handle the truth, that I was better off in the dark. He treated me like a child instead of a partner. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Grant, do you dispute any of these facts? Mark stood slowly. No, Your Honor. Everything my wife said is true. I did lie. I did conceal my daughter. I did let my son marry her without telling them they were related. His voice cracked. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I could just keep everything separate, keep everyone happy. You thought you could control everyone's lives without consequences, I said. But you can't, and now we're all paying for it. The judge looked between us. I've reviewed the financial records, the timeline, and the witness statements. This is one of the most elaborate deceptions I've encountered in family court. She turned to Mark. Mr. Grant, you orchestrated a marriage between biological half-siblings. Regardless of your intentions, the consequences are severe. She signed several documents. I'm granting the divorce. Mrs. Grant will receive 70% of all marital assets, full ownership of the apartment, and the right to her maiden name if she chooses. Mr. Grant will be responsible for all legal fees. Mark's face crumbled. His lawyer started to object, but Mark waved him off. It's fine. It's fair. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Grant, I want to say something off the record. In my 30 years on the bench, I've seen many women stay in marriages built on lies because they're afraid. You're doing something brave. Don't forget that. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside the courthouse, Mark tried one last time. Please, is there any chance? No, I said simply. Go to therapy. Make peace with Jessica. Try to build a real relationship with Lauren. But you and I? We're done. What about Daniel? That's between you and him. I'm not going to poison your relationship with your son, but I'm not going to facilitate it either. He nodded slowly, looked like he wanted to say more, then just walked away. Susan put her arm around my shoulders. How do you feel? I watched Mark disappear into the parking garage. 23 years of marriage ending in a courthouse hallway. Free, I said. I feel free. Tuesdays became my favorite day. I started teaching creative writing at the community center, a class for women rebuilding their lives after divorce loss or trauma. We met Tuesday afternoons. I never told them my full story, but they saw it in how I listened, in how I understood. One Tuesday, a woman named Patricia shared about discovering her husband's affair. The group listened, offered support. As she cried, I reached across and squeezed her hand. The truth hurts, I said softly, but living in a lie hurts more. You did the right thing. After class, I stopped at the coffee shop, the same one where I'd watched Lauren arrive 6 months ago. But now I could sit there without my stomach churning, without fear. I ordered my usual latte and opened my laptop. I'd started writing again, something I'd loved in college, but abandoned somewhere along the way. Now I was working on an essay about truth lies and the courage it takes to face reality. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Dinner tonight, Lauren and I want to see you. I hesitated, then typed back. Okay, 7 p.m. Daniel and Lauren came over that evening. They'd had their marriage legally annulled 3 months ago, just as they'd promised. But they were still together, living separately, but dating, trying to figure out what their relationship could be now. Lauren had cut her hair short. She looked different. Stronger. How are you both? I asked as we sat down to the pasta I'd made. Better, Daniel said. We started therapy, together and separately. And we told people, Lauren added quietly. Our close friends. They were shocked, but supportive mostly. Your father, Daniel's face tightened. We see him once a month. It's awkward, but Lauren needed a relationship with him, and I'm trying to support that. And Jessica, I asked Lauren. Her eyes filled with tears. We're working on it. It's hard. I'm so angry at her for leaving, but I'm also trying to understand. She was sick. She didn't abandon me because I wasn't worth loving. I reached across and took her hand. You were always worth loving. Both of you were. Your parents' failures don't define you. After dinner, as they were leaving, Lauren hugged me. Thank you for not hating us. I could never hate you, I said. What happened wasn't your fault. When they left, I cleaned up slowly, thinking about forgiveness. How it wasn't about forgetting or excusing. It was about choosing not to let other people's choices poison your future. Later that week, I ran into Jessica at the grocery store. We stood awkwardly in the produce section, both of us holding baskets, neither sure what to say. How are you? She finally asked. Good. Really good, actually. I heard about the divorce settlement. You deserved it. And you, how are things with Lauren? Jessica's eyes softened. Slow, but real. For the first time in 23 years, I'm being honest with my daughter. It's terrifying and beautiful. We stood there for another moment. Two women who'd loved the same man who'd been betrayed by the same lies who'd somehow ended up on the other side. I'm glad you came back, I said. Lauren needed her mother. Thank you, Emily, for everything. As I walked away, I realized I meant it. I was glad. Because Lauren deserved to know where she came from, even if the truth was complicated. That night, I stood at my apartment window, the same window where I'd stood so many times before, watching the city and wondering what was wrong with my life. But I wasn't wondering anymore. The walls weren't bare now. I'd hung new pictures. Photos of Daniel as a child laughing. Pictures of me and my mother before she passed. A painting I'd bought at a local art fair, abstract full of bold colors. My phone sat on the counter silent. No anxious checking for messages. No fear of what I might discover. Tuesday used to mean secrets. Hidden visits. Lies unfolding while I worked oblivious. Now Tuesday meant my writing class. Coffee with friends. Evenings with a book. My life on my terms. I thought about Mark sometimes. Wondered if he'd found peace. If he understood the damage he'd caused. I hoped he had. Not for his sake, but for Lauren's. She deserved a father who could be honest. The city lights flickered on one by one. Steady. Constant. I picked up my journal and wrote, 6 months ago, a neighbor asked me a question that destroyed my marriage. Do you know who comes to your apartment every Tuesday? The answer tore apart everything I believed about my life, but it also set me free. Some people say ignorance is bliss. They're wrong. Ignorance is just another word for prison. And truth, painful, devastating, ugly truth, is the only key that opens the door. I walked through that door, and on the other side I found myself. I closed the journal and smiled at my reflection in the darkened window. The woman looking back wasn't the same person who'd stood in this spot 6 months ago. She was older, wiser, stronger. She was free. And on Tuesdays, she was just beginning.